The coffee had gone cold long before I admitted the truth to myself. Every few minutes I glanced toward the entrance of the little roadside diner, hoping the next person who walked through the door would be the woman whose smile I'd only seen in carefully chosen photos. 60 minutes turned into 90. The empty chair across from me slowly became louder than the conversations filling the restaurant. I had survived losing my wife, rebuilding my life, and learning to smile again for the sake of my young daughter, but somehow being forgotten by a stranger felt like reopening wounds I thought had healed. Sometimes life doesn't break your heart with a loud crash, it simply leaves an empty chair in front of you. Before we continue, if you believe kindness still exists and that everyone deserves a second chance, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, and subscribe to Everyday English Podcast. Your support helps these stories reach people who need them most. The diner was called Lena's Diner, a place filled with old photographs, faded red booths, handwritten pie menus, and the comforting smell of fresh coffee. It wasn't fancy, but that was exactly why I had chosen it. My daughter Emma had convinced me that meeting someone in a warm, familiar place would make the evening easier. She was only 12, yet she had spent years trying to convince me that loneliness wasn't something I deserved to carry forever. Ever since cancer had taken her mother 4 years earlier, she had quietly become my greatest source of courage. I checked my phone again. No messages. No apology. Nothing except the same silence that had followed me for years. Around me, families laughed together, couples shared desserts, and elderly friends argued playfully over crossword puzzles. Every table seemed full except mine. Embarrassment settled heavily on my shoulders. I imagined what everyone around me must be thinking. Maybe they pitied me. Maybe they didn't notice at all. But when your heart already feels fragile, every glance feels like judgment. The waitress had served me twice already. She couldn't have been older than 30. Her name tag simply read Lena. She had bright eyes, tied-back blonde hair, and the kind of smile that wasn't forced by customer service but shaped by genuine warmth. She noticed I hadn't touched my pie. She quietly refilled my coffee without asking. She didn't try to cheer me up with jokes or empty optimism. Instead, she simply said she hoped whoever I was waiting for arrived soon. I smiled politely, but inside I had already accepted that nobody was coming. Nearly 2 hours passed before I finally reached for my wallet. That's when Lena surprised me. Instead of bringing the check, she glanced around the nearly empty diner, pulled out the chair across from me, and gently sat down. She hesitated for several seconds before speaking. She told me there was something she thought I deserved to know. My heart immediately tightened. She explained that the woman I had been waiting for had actually arrived almost an hour earlier. I stared at her, unable to understand. Lena quietly pointed toward the back corner booth where an older man had been sitting alone most of the evening. She explained that he wasn't just another customer. He was the woman's father. The woman had come inside, looked around, seen me waiting, and frozen. Before walking over, she noticed her father sitting quietly in the corner. He had secretly followed her because he was worried about her meeting someone from the internet. Instead of trusting her own judgment, she let fear win. She left without ever introducing herself. Her father stayed behind, too ashamed to interrupt. For several minutes I couldn't say anything. I looked toward the elderly man, who slowly stood and walked over. His eyes were filled with regret. He admitted everything. His daughter had lost her husband 3 years earlier in a car accident. Since then, she had isolated herself from everyone. Tonight had been the first time she'd agreed to meet someone. But seeing me reminded her how terrified she still was of opening her heart again. She panicked. She drove away in tears. Her father had wanted to stop her. Instead, he simply watched another opportunity disappear. He apologized, not because his daughter owed me anything, but because he believed I deserved honesty instead of silence. Something unexpected happened inside me. the disappointment didn't disappear. But the anger did. Because suddenly I realized I hadn't been rejected. I had simply crossed paths with another wounded soul who wasn't ready to heal. Lena quietly listened while neither of us spoke. Sometimes silence says more than words ever can. The elderly man eventually thanked me for understanding. Before leaving, he handed me a folded napkin. His daughter had written a note before walking out. It simply read, "I'm sorry. You look exactly like someone who deserves happiness. I'm just not brave enough to believe I deserve it too." I folded the note carefully and slipped it into my wallet. For the first time that evening, I didn't feel abandoned. I felt sad for someone else. Weeks passed. Life returned to its familiar routine. Early mornings. School lunches. Long shifts at work. Quiet evenings helping Emma with homework. The blind date became just another story I rarely mentioned. But one rainy Saturday afternoon, I returned to Lena's diner. Not because I expected anything. Because it reminded me that kindness still existed. Lena recognized me instantly. She smiled and brought coffee before I even ordered. This time I wasn't waiting for anyone. We simply talked. She shared stories about growing up in the town. I shared stories about Emma. She laughed at the way my daughter insisted I needed fashion advice. I laughed harder than I had in years. Over the following months, those conversations became part of our weekly routine. No expectations. No pressure. No pretending. Just two people learning that healing often begins with ordinary conversations. Emma eventually met Lena. They instantly connected over baking competitions and terrible dad jokes. For the first time since losing my wife, my daughter looked at someone with genuine excitement instead of cautious politeness. One evening Emma quietly whispered something that stopped me in my tracks. She said she liked seeing me smile again because it made the house feel alive. I realized then that moving forward wasn't betraying the past. It was honoring it. Months later, I received another letter. It came from the woman who had never shown up. She explained that therapy had helped her confront the fear she'd carried for years. She thanked me for showing unexpected compassion through someone else's apology. She had since found peace and hoped I had too. I smiled while reading it. Not because I wished things had turned out differently. Because I finally understood that not every person enters your life to stay. Some simply remind you that everyone is fighting battles you'll never fully see. If Lena had never walked over that night. If her kindness had remained behind the coffee counter. If one honest conversation had never happened. I might have left believing I wasn't enough. Instead, I walked away believing something far more important. Sometimes rejection isn't about your worth. Sometimes it's about another person's unfinished healing. Years later, whenever people asked my wife Lena how we first met, she'd laugh softly before saying that the best love stories don't always begin with perfect timing. Sometimes they begin with an empty chair, a cold cup of coffee, and one simple question. Can I tell you something? If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who may need hope today, leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to Everyday English Podcast. Your support encourages us to keep sharing stories that remind people kindness still changes lives. Sparkle's special request: before this story ends, please comment one word, hope, if you believe one act of kindness can completely change someone's life. Because the greatest miracles rarely arrive the way we expect them to. Sometimes they simply sit down across the table when everyone else has walked away.